Hi, I'm Warren Sprouse. This is the Bible Forum. It's July 15th, 2018. I want to welcome you to the Bible Forum. We do this every Sunday night from 8 p.m. until 10 p.m. Eastern. We spend 2 hours looking at life from a biblical perspective. We look at the news, we look at the views, the things that are going on, and we do it all through a biblical lens. We try to solve the problems if we can. And we love having you here. We love having you in our chat room. We've got a number of folks who have already lined up. We've been interacting here a little bit. Maybe you'd like to be a part of that little family. We have segments of the program which cut up into pieces and is on the Bible Forum website throughout the week, as well as our Facebook page and YouTube page. So you can go to bed early if you want and catch the rest of it later. We understand how that works. Uh, we also try to encourage you as much as possible, if it is possible, for you to financially contribute. We are a nonprofit corporation, 501c3 ministry, and it does take money to run the outfit here. So if there's anything you can do to help, we really would appreciate it. You can send a check. You can use PayPal. We have a PayPal program. Different ways that you can do this. Make the checks out to alternatives. They're all tax deductible. If you are going to send a check and you don't know where to send it, you need to email me at thebibleforum@gmail.com. I'll give you the address. So let's get going here with the things that have been happening. Lots of stuff, dangerous stuff, is happening over in Israel today as we speak. Residents of Israeli communities near the Gaza Strip spent last Friday night in bomb shelters. Seems Palestinian terror groups are firing rockets and mortar shells across the border into Israel. The army said they are hitting all sorts of domestic targets, including a synagogue. 6 of the projectiles were intercepted by the Iron Dome system. Israeli forces retaliated with multiple rocket attacks, primarily on the attack tunnels there in the Gaza Strip. It was the most serious attack on Israeli forces in over 3 months of these border protests, during which time soldiers have on several occasions been targeted with gunfire and bombs. No injuries reported. Prime Minister Netanyahu vows increased retaliation against Hamas. The good news this week, it's old news because it happened a week ago for the most part, but those 12 boys and their coach that were trapped in the cave over there in Thailand, I think it was, almost a mile from freedom, with at least 2 sections of the cave completely filled with water, have been rescued. The world was fixated on this tragedy, watching with hope and with fear that the worst might actually happen. It did not. We're being told that each of the boys were sedated so that they could be brought out safely. 4 divers accompanying each one of these young people on that almost 1-mile journey underground. They have been in a hospital all this week. They are getting out this weekend. I can't imagine how the leader of these boys must feel, the mixed emotions that he's going through. I have not seen or heard any interviews. If he's smart, he probably won't do any. And I'm not quite sure what his emotional state will be going forward. Try to put yourself in that place. Since we talked last week, we've got a new U.S. Supreme Court nominee. There are a number of things you need to know perhaps about him. His name is Brett Kavanaugh. He was close to Justice Kennedy. Kennedy is the one resigning. Kennedy's the one who the Democrats, the liberals think is on his side. He worked for the man. Kavanaugh was hired as a law clerk for Justice Kennedy in 1993, sworn in by Kennedy as a judge in the D.C. Court of Appeals just in 2003. He was also involved in one of the most controversial immigration cases in the early 2000s. Kavanaugh represented pro bono the relatives of Elian Gonzalez. Remember Elian? 6-year-old Cuban boy who became the centerpiece of a nasty custody battle. Elian's father wanted him back in Cuba. His other relatives believed it would have been best for him to stay here in the U.S. with them. Mr. Kavanaugh worked on that case on behalf of Elian. He was on George W. Bush's legal team arguing against the Florida recount. Kavanaugh also found himself in the middle of a controversy again when he joined the legal team of then President-elect George W. Bush to argue about those votes. It all went to the Supreme Court, and the court voted 5-4 to stop the recounting and ultimately allowed Bush to become president. In 2006, during his confirmation hearing, for the Court of Appeals, Senator Chuck Schumer asked if he was against Roe v. Wade. Kavanaugh made it very clear that he would uphold precedent. He said, quote, "I would follow Roe v. Wade faithfully and fully," end of quote. He said that would be binding precedent of the court, since it's been decided by the Supreme Court. Kavanaugh was one of the co-authors of the Starr Report, arguing for a broad definition of obstruction of justice. Kenneth Starr's investigative report concerning the death of former President Bill Clinton's aide, Vince Foster, and the 11 grounds for Clinton's impeachment was co-authored by Kavanaugh. Oh, and the NRA really, really likes him. I'm impressed with the man. I'm also impressed with the idea that they're going to jump in and just get this done. I don't think that in the end there'll be a problem. There'll be a lot of posturing and a lot of talking and a lot of nonsense going on around him. But he'll be voted on. He'll be approved. Won't be a problem. Our president is overseas. He was in Belgium. He was in Great Britain. He's now in Scotland on his way to Russia. What'd you think of President Trump taking on the NATO nations regarding their financial responsibility? He thinks they ought to pay what they agreed to pay. He thinks they should pay at least 2%. We pay somewhere between 2 and 4%, depending on what time of year and which year it is. He thinks they've been letting us carry the weight for their defense. He thinks Germany is undermining NATO by buying gas directly from Russia, got their own pipeline. He thinks Germany is sold out to NATO, since a previous German chancellor is the one who made the deal with the gas and is now running that international effort with Russia. And observers think President Trump went too far. He called Chancellor Merkel by her given name, Angela. Terrible. At issue here is Germany's domination of the European Union. Germany is the largest European economy, and NATO exists because of Germany's destruction of Europe. It's been 70 years and we forget these things. The economies of EU nations are struggling, especially as Great Britain is looking to pull out. Although Chancellor Merkel has indicated that's not a done deal, and just this week, just recently, she said some words that lead you to believe that she's much stronger in her unwillingness to leave the EU than anybody thought. And the United States has 40,000 troops in Europe. They're there to defend against Russian incursions. all the while footing the largest percentage of the bill. It's a nasty mess. It's just not neat. Since 1991, every NATO nation whose commitments have been steadily below the 2% GDP level has been steadily reducing their financial commitment. Everybody, that is, except Portugal, Poland, and of course the United States, which has fluctuated between 3 and 4.5%. And given our larger GDP ratio, the dollars we send in that 3 to 4.5% are much larger, significantly higher than what they're putting in there. If this were a discussion between investors and a business, the United States would have been long gone, since we derive no direct benefit from this expenditure. It's an amazing lesson in human nature that the nation which saved Europe from total annihilation is now the bad guy because we won't continue to take care of them. The Europe which embraced American economic philosophy to their benefit is now spitting in our face because we won't pay more. After 70 years of help, protection, and financial support, this is what we get. In a secular world, this is what's called normal. Think young adult children still living at home or expecting their parents to keep them afloat while they pursue their frivolous lifestyles. It's called failure to launch. In a world where biblical values dominate, this would be called insanity, or the highest level of selfishness, and it would not be tolerated. So watch and listen as the mainstream news talks about this. See how they characterize this whole thing. And the bad news is, a report from Scientific American said there are problems this year for the species of shorebirds that each year descend on the Arctic to mate and raise chicks. Why? Because reproduction happens during the summer. And because an extensive July snow this year, there's been no summer. The report said the frozen precipitation, quote, sealed the birds off from food and nesting sites, end of quote. Can you say? Global warming. Also, the Justice Department announced indictments against Russian operatives who hacked into the Democrat Party's emails. Did you notice when they did it? Yeah, about the time the president was over there talking to people about such things. All the while, the U.S. House of Representatives Oversight and Judiciary Committees were questioning former Justice Department operative Peter Strzok in regard to his possible involvement. Strzok is reported to have texted his lawyer girlfriend on his FBI phone, expressing his and her serious objection to Trump and his nomination for president, something called the Trump dossier. The document, supposedly constructed by Russian operatives and presented to the Justice Department by the fourth-ranking official at the Justice Department. His name is Bruce Ohr. Bruce Ohr is a man married to the woman who works for the company that constructed that document. The company's called Fusion GPS. A document that was paid for by the Democrat National Committee. Can you say soap opera? And what's wrong with the children? An extensive article in the Daily Mail over in Great Britain reports that mothers across London note substantial changes in their children's behavior. Why the noticeable shift? Well, it seems to be all about a new popular video game called Fortnite. One 9-year-old girl was even sent to rehab. Parents sought help after finding her playing the game in the middle of the night, sitting on a urine-soaked cushion as she had been too engrossed to go to the toilet. A 15-year-old boy was hospitalized. It seems Fortnite left him unable to go to school for an entire year, and he needed vitamin D tablets because of the lack of sunlight. A mother says of her son Luke, he was such a lovely boy, but this game has turned him into a nightmare. Why all the chaos? Well, the premise of the game is survival of the fittest. Gamers are dropped into a location of their choosing, into a preset map, and urged to survive. Guns and other life forms are available throughout the play, encouraging gamers to stay alive as long as possible. Like other popular games, participants can choose to play with friends on the internet. The parents in this particular story present as people who were away for at least a year or more while all this was going on, largely in their homes. They didn't know and they couldn't stop it, and they just don't know what to do. Who needs the therapy? These are children in your home. Pick up the game, throw it out the window. How hard can this be? A new report warns of the tensions between the United States and Iran, and between Iran and Saudi Arabia, that they are reaching a critical level. The risks of a deliberate or accidental confrontation among these parties is at an all-time high, explains a report in Joseph Farah's G2 bulletin. The conclusion comes from something called, quote, the crisis group, end of quote, which sets out to explain Barack Obama's joint comprehensive plan of action, signed by several world powers, including Iran. A plan which intended to curb Iran's nuclear ambition and is now 2 years into its life and facing what they call jeopardy. Keep in mind, President Trump removed the United States from the agreement just this past May. Simultaneously, regional dynamics across the Middle East are trending in a worrisome direction, the report goes on to say. Friction between Iran and the U.S. is growing in Iraq and in Syria as the strength of their common foe, the Islamic State, diminishes. In Lebanon, Yemen, Israel, and the U.S. and a more assertive Saudi leadership see an emboldened Iran. They are determined to cut down to size, according to this report. The report also contends that there are a lot of bad things that could happen. It's an interactive early warning platform aimed at monitoring, analyzing, and providing regular updates on the key and increasingly tense flashpoints between Iran and the U.S. or between their respective allies, according to the organization. The report also says it is launching its Iran-U.S. trigger list to provide an early warning system to potential catastrophe. That's our world, in case you were interested. It doesn't sound like a safe world. It doesn't sound like a sane world. But it is the world at the beginning of the 21st century. The century, I believe, is going to see the return of the Lord Jesus Christ. We'll be back. I want to give you a little bit of an earthquake alert. Dateline, July 15th, 2018. Stay tuned. We'll talk about it.